Welcome to Super Return Africa. With me is Samantha Pokroy, founder and CEO of Sanari Capital. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you, Dorothy. It's nice to be here.
We hear a lot about the increased burdens of corporate governance and private equity firms. What's your take on that?
I think it's a fantastic question because we hear a lot of people complaining about it, and I think a lot of it goes down to there's a connotation around corporate governance, and it equals administration and burdens and the weight and compliance. But I actually think what people are missing is the underlying objective of corporate governance. And so obviously as private equity fund managers, we're very aware of the benefits of corporate governance in our underlying portfolio. So I don't think this is a difficult concept to appreciate. I think that part of the issue is that sometimes there is an overburden on the reporting side of compliance that tends to almost distract from what the underlying matters are. So what we have been discussing has really been around understanding that there's, first of all, two different types of objectives that I think we're trying to achieve with corporate governance. First of all is understanding when there is intentional misconduct and then unintentional shortfalls in corporate governance. And that actually the solutions are quite different. So, if someone is looking to defraud, it's going to be a different type of intervention. So the burdens, the administration, etc., might not even catch it. But if you make sure that you are prioritizing the types of governance that can actually address that and find that, then it's valuable, and it's valuable to the fund managers, valuable to the underlying companies, and it's obviously valuable to the LPs. If it is unintentional, so I think that the other side of it is where it's not necessarily an integrity issue, but more a matter of a fund manager having their hands full. And in particular, this is an issue for smaller fund managers, whether they're first-time fund managers or not. Just from an economics perspective, having all of the infrastructure in place to consistently govern can be quite cumbersome. And that's where I think the question comes in. And what's quite nice is that Hani Assad from Vans, who has worked with ILPA and with Impia, has actually put together some pretty practical guidelines and has shared with us that it's really important to prioritize. And it's not the same priorities for every single fund manager, it's context specific, but that if you focus on the most important compliance or governance areas, it will actually add value. If you try and do all of them at once, you're actually probably going to start to miss things, and then it becomes a problem. So I think that overall the burden is a burden, but it's a necessary burden. But I think it's making sure that we focus our efforts in the right place so that we're, at the end of the day, getting the right set of results.
And you mentioned a little bit about what private equity firms could do. What are some best practices for them in corporate governance?
So I think one of the things that is quite widely known now and well researched is that in addition to various processes and systems and structures that you need to put in place, it comes down to a lot to do with, for example, the composition of your teams and the composition of your board. So one of the areas that has grown in awareness, at least in recent times, is the role of diversity and balance on a board. And I found it very interesting today where one of my fellow panelists, Tamsin from Boardroom Africa, really highlighted for us that promoting a gender balanced board doesn't just bring the benefits of having the gender diversity, but actually that when you create that diversity within a board, it actually opens up the input from other diverse groups. So, and that ultimately, there's IFC research that shows that these gender diverse boards produce, or not just boards, but actually investment teams at a senior level, produce 20% higher investment returns. I'm not really sure that I know of any investors that would turn down an extra 20%, whether it's at the LP level or at the GP level. So I think that as a really good starting point is to make sure that we are getting our gender balance, but really our diversity across the board for better investment results.
And interestingly, you referenced some smaller private equity firms earlier. How can private equity firms balance the needs for corporate governance and doing the day-to-day job?
So I think a lot of this has got to do with trying to achieve some kind of scale economies, right? So each fund manager should not have to try and figure this out for themselves. There should be, and I think there are, and it could be a collaboration amongst GPs, but this is also areas for intervention and involvement from whether it's DFIs or broader base of LPs to be able to support the fund managers to make sure they've got the systems and systems training to be able to do what needs to be done. Through to the industry associations, SAVCA's Fund Manager Development Program is seeking to bring together emerging managers and provide that training, provide those resources so that they can get to a base level much more easily than what most of the firms have had to go through to achieve the highest standards that they can.
Samantha, it's always a pleasure having you here at Super Return Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dorothy.